Hi, fifth graders. Welcome back to the Fabled fourth graders of Aesop Elementary. Today's chapter, Picture Day. Rose Clutterdorf had overslept again. Hurry, hurry, her mother cried. Rose snatched yesterday's clothes off the floor and flung them on. She raced downstairs and, grabbing her backpack and a cold toaster tart, raced out the door. She didn't even take time to brush her teeth or pee or run a comb through her tangled hair. Minutes later, she screeched into the classroom and Rose shook her head. Why did everyone look so weird? Ashley A was wearing a ruffled skirt and pantyhose. Ashley B was wearing a shimmery green party dress. And Ashley Z was wearing dress pants and a collared shirt, and his shirt was tucked in. The truth hit Rose like a ton of social studies books. Oh no, she gasped. It's picture day. Victoria walked over to Rose and smirked. You obviously forgot. Victoria had dressed for picture day as if it were her wedding day. Her long blonde hair had been swept up into a swirling mass of curls and hairpins. She was wearing a white velvet dress, white lace tights, and nice pearl collar, snickered Lenny. It looks like something my grandmother would wear, added Bruce. Or my basset hound, put in Emberly. Snorted Victoria. Boys don't know anything about fashion, and she flounced away. Any other day, Rose wouldn't have cared what Victoria thought. She wouldn't have worried about her clothes on her hair, but today was different. Today was picture day. Rose looked down at her wrinkled pink jeans and rumpled yellow t-shirt, which read, My grandmother went to Borneo and all I got was this t-shirt. Tears prickled her eyes. Her best friend, Missy, tried to cheer her up. I have some extra barrettes in my desk, she said. We can at least fix your hair. Rose hesitated. Barrettes? She never wore barrettes. It just wasn't her style. No, thank you. She began, but Missy cut her off. Do you want to look special on picture day or not? Rose nodded. Then come on, said Missy. She pulled Rose into the corner of the room, right next to Mr. Jupiter's suit of armor, found while exploring the underground tomb of the Knights of Templar, he had explained, and he began pinning plastic butterflies all over Rose's head. At that moment, Amisha walked over. You need earrings too, she said, and she clipped a dangly pair onto Rose earrings. Rose never wore earrings. They weren't her style either. Besides, they pinched. I'd rather go without jewelry, said Rose. No jewelry on picture day, gasped Amisha. She jangled her gold bracelets. You wouldn't look special enough. Before Rose could reply, Victoria pushed her way into the corner. You, girl, need some color, she proclaimed, whipping out a tube of cha-ching cherry lip gloss. She aimed it at Rose's mouth and said, pucker up. I don't know if this is such a good idea, said Rose. I've never worn makeup before. That's obvious, replied Victoria. Still, you want to look special on picture day, don't you? Rose nodded. Victoria smeared a thick pink streak across Rose's mouth, then touched up her own shimmering lips. Now we both look special. Rose longed to wipe away the sticky mess, but before she could grab a tissue, Emberly slipped a pair of rhinestone sunglasses over her eyes. Yeah, now that looks special, he declared. Then Jackie draped a basketball jersey over her shoulders. Really special, she declared, and Ham tied a bow tie around her neck. Really, really special, he declared. I don't know, began Rose, but her classmates paid no attention to her. They were too busy adding knee pads, a nose ring, tube socks, snow boots, press-on fingernails, a cowboy hat, a charm bracelet, temporary tattoos, a sequin belt, a silk scarf, and a plastic Hawaiian lei. At last, they stepped back to admire their work. What do you think? They asked Rose. They turned her so she could see her reflection in the suit of armor's shiny breastplate. Rose gasped. None of it. Not the tattoos or the boots or the nose ring was her style. She looked So special, sighed Missy. The others nodded their agreement. Rose looked from her ridiculous reflection to her smiling classmates. How could she tell them she thought she looked stupid? She couldn't. At that moment, Mr. Jupiter, dressed for the occasion in a Mayan ceremonial robe, a gift from the President of Mexico, he had exclaimed, clapped his hands. Line up, please. It's time for pictures. Everyone hurried to the door. Miserably, Rose followed. In the lunchroom, Miss Turner was already in front of the camera. Or at least the fourth graders thought it was Miss Turner. In place of her usual shapeless jumper and bulky sweater, however, the librarian was wearing an attractive blue dress that showed off her curves no one had ever known she'd had. Say cheese, said the photographer. Cheese, said Miss Turner, smiling. Flash. She wiggled her fingers at Mr. Jupiter before hurrying back to the library, her sensible loafers making her faint shh sound. Then it was Victoria's turn. Pinching her cheeks and biting her lips to make them redder, she smiled a dazzling smile. Flash! Emberly grinned from ear to ear. Flash! Lenny stuck out his tongue. Flash! Finally, Rose stepped gloomily into front of the camera. Smile, said the photographer. How can I? She sighed. Look what I'm wearing. The photographer shrugged. Flash! Rose couldn't smile for the class photo either. As she knelt in the front row, earrings pinching, tube socks falling down, she crossed her fingers. Please, oh please, let the camera break. Let the photographer accidentally cover the lens with his thumb. Let the photography studio lose the pictures. 3 weeks later, Mr. Jupiter announced, Wonderful news, children. Your pictures are here. He began handing out envelopes. Victoria ripped hers open. Lovely as usual. I look good too, said Bernadette. Boy, I'm handsome, said Melvin. The others ignored him. As for Rose, she held the envelope in her trembling hand. She couldn't bring herself to open it. Yowza, yelped Humphrey. Look at the class picture. Look at Rose. Everyone but Rose pulled their class picture out of the envelope. She braced herself. Man, your hair looks like a bee's nest, snickered Ham. Like a butterfly's nest, actually, corrected Stanford. What's with the knee pads? Giggled Amisha. And the bow tie, tittered Lil. Then Mr. Jupiter shouted, Stop! Everyone looked toward the teacher. I can't believe it, he cried as he peered at the class picture. How could this have happened? How? It simply will not do. What won't do? Asked Bernadette. Rose's tattoo? My outfit, exclaimed Mr. Jupiter. Don't you see? I wore a Mayan ceremonial robe without holding the matching canary head scepter. He slapped his forehead. In the tribal world, it's a complete fashion no-no. Well, there's nothing else to do. We'll have to retake the class photo. We will, said Rose hopefully. Absolutely, replied Mr. Jupiter. Rose smiled with relief. Want to borrow my butterfly barrettes again? Asked Missy. No, thanks, said Rose, and she smiled at her ordinary, everyday reflection in the breastplate of Mr. Jupiter's suit of armor. Moral of the story? Try to please all, and you end by pleasing none. Dance, Stanford, dance. Teachers called Stanford Benet conscientious. This meant he did all his homework, studied for every test, kept the inside of his desk tidy, and always returned his library books on time. This also meant he annoyed his classmates. Why can't you act like a regular kid? Calvin asked during Friday free time. Stanford, who was alphabetizing next month's vocabulary words, snorted, You mean waste my time like everyone else? He rolled his eyes. Get serious. I am serious, said Calvin. You should play more games, have more fun, laugh once in a while. Stanford snorted again. Playing games won't earn me an A in spelling. Having fun won't make me the best student in the class. Laughing won't get me into a top-notch college. Geez, said Calvin, who cares about stupid stuff like that? I do, snapped Stanford. He went back to alphabetizing. Calvin went back to his finger paints. Just then, Mr. Jupiter clapped his hands. Put away away your things and line up at the door, please. It's time to rehearse for this year's fall musical." "Ugh, I hate the fall musical," Lenny grumbled as the children headed down the hall. "I always end up wearing a squirrel costume." "Leonard," corrected Mr. Jupiter, "you know I don't allow that word. There is no hating in my classroom." Lenny looked around. "I'm not hating in the classroom," he said. "I'm hating in the hallway?" "There's no hating in the hallway either," said Mr. Jupiter. The children walked into the auditorium. "Can I hate in here?" asked Lenny. Mr. Jupiter shook his head. "I hate that," Lenny muttered under his breath. He followed the others onto the stage. Mrs. Playwright, the traveling drama teacher, was waiting for them. Until this year, every elementary school had always had its own drama teacher, but the district had run out of money. Now all 64 elementary schools shared Mrs. Playwright. She smiled. "I'm so excited about this year's fall musical at Marcus Aurelius Elementary School." "Marcus Aurelius?" repeated Humphrey. The children looked at one another. "You mean Aesop Elementary School," said Amisha. "What?" said Mrs. Playwright. "This is Aesop School," said Bernadette. "It is?" said Mrs. Playwright. She flipped over her calendar. "Let's see. Marcus Aurelius School on the 6th, Caesar School on the 16th, Ovid School on the 26th, Aesop School on the..." She turned back to the children. "Oh, I'm so excited about this year's fall music at Aesop Elementary School." She handed out the sheets of music. "Now then, children," she said, "this is the song you will be performing. Let's sing just the first verse so I know what you sound like. Ready?" She tooted her pitch pipe, and the children squawked. "Up on the treetops I see leaves. They are swaying in the breeze. First they are green, but when it turns cold, they change to red and orange and gold." "Ugh," said Calvin. "Gross," said Emberly. "Barf," said Mrs. Playwright. "That was awful. This class is going to need lots of singing practice. Now let's see your dancing skills. Your routine goes like this," she demonstrated. "Side together, clap. Side together, clap. Shimmy, shuffle, hop, turn, kick, cha-cha-cha." "Now you try," she said. The children hopped, shuffled, kicked. Oomph! Amisha bumped into Ham. Rachel tripped over Melvin. Bruce accidentally grabbed Bernadette's hand. "Cooties!" he cried. "Get serious," snorted Stanford. "It's a scientific fact that girls don't have cooties." "Then you don't mind if I do this," said Bruce. He wiped his hand on Stanford's Theory of Relativity t-shirt. "Ugh, disgusting," cried Stanford. "I agree," said Mrs. Playwright. "Your dancing skills are disgusting. This class is going to need lots of dancing practice, too." "How long do we have to learn it all?" Stanford asked. "Just 6 weeks," answered Mrs. Playwright. "That means all of you will need to get serious," said Stanford. "Exactly," said Mrs. Playwright. She smiled at Stanford. "The fourth graders at Cicero Elementary School are certainly conscientious." "Cicero Elementary School?" repeated Humphrey. "You mean Aesop Elementary School," corrected Victoria. "What?" said Mrs. Playwright. "This is Aesop School," said Lil. Oh, yes, right, said Mrs. Playwright. She shook her head to clear it. "The fourth graders here at Aesop Elementary are certainly conscientious." "I try," said Stanford. "I think I'm going to be sick," gagged Bruce. After that, Stanford practiced every chance he got. He practiced on the playground, up on the treetops, in the lunch line. "I see leaves, even in the boys' bathroom. They're swaying in the breeze." His classmates watched with annoyance. "Why bother?" Bernadette asked one day. "The fall musical is a long way off." "Get serious," said Stanford. "The day of the show will be here before you know it. I'm learning my part, and I think you should too." But no one listened to his advice. 3 weeks before the musical, Stanford knew the entire song, all 3 verses, by heart. The others knew nothing. "Let's take it again from the top," cried Mrs. Playwright. During rehearsal, she blew her pitch pipe and sang, "Up on the treetops I see fleas," sang Rose. "A wet sneeze," sang Bruce. "Limburger cheese," sang Ham. "Get serious," said Stanford. "Why?" replied his classmates. "We've still got plenty of time." They kept rhyming. Stanford kept practicing. 2 weeks before the musical, Stanford could do every kick, shimmy, and shuffle perfectly. The others could do nothing. "Show me a cha-cha-cha," cried Mrs. Playwright during rehearsal. Bernadette did 2 leaps and an arabesque. Jackie spun around on her back. Bruce grabbed Calvin and tangled him around the stage. "Get serious," said Stanford. "We will," replied his classmates. "Later." They all tangoed. Stanford practiced. 1 week before the musical, Stanford could sing all 3 verses while kicking, shimmying, and shuffling at the same time. As for the others, "We'll start tomorrow," they said. "You promise?" begged Mrs. Playwright. "Cross our hearts and hope to cha-cha-cha," they replied. Stanford rolled his eyes. "Get serious," he said, and he kept practicing. When the night of the fall musical arrived, the auditorium was crammed full. Exhausted teachers, excited students, proud parents, bored brothers and sisters, crying babies, obligated school board members, aunts, uncles, grandparents, even a photographer from the local newspaper took up every seat. Mrs. Playwright stepped onto the spotlight. "Welcome to Petronius Elementary School's fall musical." The audience looked at one another. "You mean Aesop Elementary School?" whispered Mrs. Struggles from the front row. "What?" said Mrs. Playwright. "Aesop School!" Mrs. Bunce bellowed through her bullhorn she always kept at her side. "Is it?" asked Mrs. Playwright. She flipped open her calendar. "Let's see. Petronius on the 4th, Pliny the Elder on the 14th, Horace on the 24th, Aesop School on the..." She turned back to the audience. "Welcome to Aesop Elementary School's fall musical." The audience clapped. Backstage, the 4th graders watched nervously as the 1st graders brought down the house with their song, "I'm a Little Acorn." The 2nd graders tickled the audience's funny bone with a humorous skit called "Roly Poly Pumpkin." The 3rd graders stopped the show with their interpretive dance, "Make Applesauce." Then it was the 4th grader's turn. "Break a leg," said Mr. Jupiter. "It's a terrible thing to say," said Missy. "It's an expression I learned while performing in Cats on Broadway," explained Mr. Jupiter. "It's theater talk for good luck." "Oh, in that case, thank you," said Missy. "You're welcome," said Mr. Jupiter. He hurried off to take his seat in the audience. "You're on," whispered Mrs. Playwright. She began pushing the children from the wings. They stumbled on stage and into the spotlight. "Now what?" whispered Lenny. He shoved the sagging hood of his squirrel costume out of his eyes just as the music started. "Up on the treetops," the 4th graders began shakily. "I see leaves," Stanford belted out. Bursting from the wings, he whirled across the stage, his oak leaf costume bumping past Lenny, elbowing aside Emberly. "Ouch!" Tripping Victoria. "Hey!" He sighed together, clapped as he sang, "Up on the treetops I see leaves. They are swaying in the breeze. First they are green, but when it turns cold, they change to red and orange and gold." His classmates tried to keep up, but it was no use. They kicked when they should have shimmied. They shuffled when they should have kicked. And no one knew when to cha-cha-cha. Finally, they came to a complete standstill as Stanford danced around them, then burst into the 2nd verse. "Go, go, go, where did they go? Ho, 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 don't you know?" The audience leaped to its feet as Stanford cha-cha-cha'd his way into the big finish. "That's when the wind blows swish, 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 and they come floating down like this." As the rest of the class slunk off stage, the audience whistled, stomped their feet, and shouted, "Encore! Encore!" Mrs. Playwright asked Stanford to take a bow, and the newspaper photographer snapped his picture. "Our readers want to know," he said, "do you plan on becoming a singer and dancer when you grow up?" Stanford snorted. "Get serious." Then he hurried off stage to work on his book report about The Haunted Room by Hugo first. After all, it was due in just 6 weeks. Moral of the story? It is wise to prepare today for the wants of tomorrow. I hope you enjoyed today's 2 chapters. Have a great day.